This is a production from the Takedown Sports. What's up, y'all? T Brown 31 here from the Takedown Sports, along with Jay about the Great, and this is another episode of The Last Word. We got a bunch of topics to hit today, so what's coming up?
We'll be recapping games 3 through 5 for each series of the NBA playoffs. We'll be giving predictions for Thursday and Friday's Game 6 matchups, and once again, we'll be tackling issues with the fans.
Yeah, that's unfortunate that we have to do that again, but like you said, we'll be starting off with a series recap for the Western Conference. So first up, we got Utah and Memphis. So Utah ended up winning the series 4-1. They began tied after game 2, 1-1, and then Utah won each game following that. In game 3 by 10 points, winning game 4 by 7, and then winning by 16 in game 5 to cap the series and be the only Western Conference team as of right now to move on to the second round.
Yeah, and it's pretty much just the story of Donovan Mitchell. Right? Donovan Mitchell's out, they lose it. The Grizzlies are on fire. They just come off with sending Steph Curry home. They come out, they steal one. Donovan comes back, and you got Donovan averaging like 20 points per game. Mike Conley was as well. Rudy Gobert was holding things down on the defensive end. And with that trio working together, just completely in sync against that kind of young, not playoff ready Grizzlies team, it was an easy gentleman's sweep after the Grizzlies stole one in game 1.
Yeah, I mean, it's starting to become really common for us to see these teams, like Memphis, these lower seeded teams to steal a game. And obviously, when Utah doesn't have Donovan Mitchell, it's pretty easy to do so. Um, Once they got Donovan Mitchell back, that was pretty much it. We knew one way or the other that they were not going to be able to take Utah in 7 games. It just wasn't going to happen. But that's nothing for Memphis to be mad about. They did, get the Warriors up out of there. So, beating Steph Curry, future Hall of Famer, getting him out of the playoffs, and then at least stealing a game against the number 1 seed. That's something to take to the bank, and next year they'll be a lot better for sure. So, moving on to LA and Dallas, that would be the Clippers and the Mavericks. And this series is kind of a surprise for a lot of people. Right now, Dallas is leading the series 3-2. They started off 2-0, winning 2 games in LA, and then LA won 2 games in Dallas. Then they returned to LA, and Dallas wins game 5. So right now they're up 3-2. And with the way that Luke is playing, they might just win game 6 and send the Clippers packing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Clippers going out in 6 is probably the biggest possibility, or maybe not the biggest one. I was going to say of the ones that are still left at 3-2, but it's very likely. It's been a very weird series, though. Usually the home team will at least take one game at home unless they're getting swept. But like Dallas is 3-0 in LA and 0-2 in Dallas, and it's just kind of a weird way. Now, the second game that was played in Dallas, Luka was really dealing with a neck strain. He still had the kind of like bandaged cast thing on in game 5, but he scored 42 points, had like 14 assists. So I think he's all right. But yeah, the Clippers have got to do something different than what they've been doing. Maybe what they did in game 3 and 4 should be what they focus on. Otherwise, Kawhi and PG-13 are going home early.
Yeah, like you said, it's a weird series because usually you don't see the lower seed win the first 2 games in the higher seed's house, and then the higher seed come back and win 2 games in the lower seed's house, and then it happens again in game 5. So if the trend somehow continues like that, LA will win game 6 in Dallas, and then Dallas wins game 7. If you're a Clipper fan, that's probably the worst scenario to have happen, but it's very likely the way they're playing now. So they definitely have to stop Luka. He can't be scoring 40 a game. So moving on to Denver and Portland. So Denver right now is up 3-2 on the Trailblazers. So after this series started 1-1, Denver won game three, Portland won game four, and then we had a double overtime thriller. Unfortunately for the Trailblazers, Dame Time did pretty much everything, and they couldn't come up with the win. So in game five, Denver took it home, and they're up 3-2, looking to close out tonight.
Yeah, I mean that game five was a heartbreaker for Dame. You know, he went out and broke record for threes in the playoffs, and then I mean scored 55, had like three different records broken in that one game, and yet came up in a double OT loss. He also is the one who forced OT both times, and then I guess you know once you got the double OT, the Nuggets were like, nah, we're done, and they pulled ahead and won by 7. And I mean it was a thriller, and it sucks to see a guy do all that and still come up short. But the Blazers want to come out of this series alive. They've got to, you know, let the people around Dame also fire up. Let Dame have his time too, but he needs help. You can't do everything yourself.
Yeah, I had a feeling that this series would not be a wash or anything. With Damian Lillard on your team, you're not going to get knocked out of the playoffs in 4 games, generally. But like you said, he cannot do everything. Like they have to do something to the guys behind Dame, from the second guy on the roster, CJ, to Nurkic, everybody down. They gotta help him out, man, because if he's just scoring 40, 50 points every game and they still end up losing, like what does it matter, right? So it's going to be Judgment Day for them tonight, and the game does start in a few minutes for us, so we'll be keeping an eye on that. And then to the last series, which this one is another weird series on the West. Phoenix right now is up 3-2 on LA. So after this one was tied after game two, uh, LA went up in game three, and then Phoenix won game four after AD got injured. And then an absolutely disgusting display from the Lakers in game five, just getting destroyed. They lose by 30 to the Suns, and the Suns, now 3-2, are looking to end things tonight as well.
This is another series that you would consider weird from an outside perspective when you look at it as well. The 7th seed has the 2 seed going to game 6 tonight, but you got to remember this Lakers. These are the defending champs who pretty much made their roster better. And this has just been crazy. I mean, they've had injury woes with AD, but like, you know, just losing one guy can't cause you to suddenly lose by 30. So it's a scary series for the Lakers. I mean, it's crazy to even think that LeBron could go home in the first round, even in like 6 games if Phoenix was to close it tonight, which I'm not predicting what, but it is a crazy series. The Suns have proven that they are a playoff team. They didn't get the 2 seed for nothing, but it's been tough. It's been gritty. These two teams have had their fair shares of scuffles on court, and yeah, it's just been a wild season from everything about it.
Yeah, and I'll be the first to admit I was wrong. I thought, once Chris Paul got injured, LA won that game after he got injured. And then, they're going into game three. He's like, I'm like, all right, so the Lakers got this in five. And then AD gets injured. It's like, all right, so now Chris Paul is seemingly mostly recovered. Not totally, of course, but he's decently recovered now. Uh, AD is a game time decision. It's just looking bad for LA, but we'll talk more about that later. So now we're on to the Eastern side of things, and we'll be having a little bit of a different conversation now because every single Eastern Conference series is done. So there's not going to be much speculation here as far as the first round goes. So in the first round, we start off with New York and Atlanta, and New York ended up dropping to Atlanta 4-1 after the series was tied after game two. Atlanta then went on to win 3 straight games, 2 in Atlanta, and then the final dagger in New York to kill the Knicks.
Yeah, I mean, we both called this one as going at least 6-7. Trey Young and Clint Capella had other ideas. Bogdan Bogdanovic also was crazy in this series. Knicks, this is the most Knicks thing to happen. They finally make the playoffs again. They steal, or not even steal, because they're the higher seed. They get game two, they tie the series, and then they just crumble. And RJ Barrett said before the game yesterday, "We're gonna win. That's that." And that didn't happen. Or what Clint Capella said, where he said, "We're sending you on vacation," and that did.
The thing that confuses me the most about these Knicks fans is like I expected it to be a more competitive series, like definitely going 6 or 7. But why do these Knicks fans act like they should have swept Atlanta? You had the same regular season record. You were 4 or 5 matchup, which is historically, the closest matchup because they're two teams that either have the same record or are very close record wise. And Trey Young is the best player on the court. So, like, why did these Knicks fans assume that they would just be killing Atlanta? I mean, it should have been way more competitive, but I mean, come on. Regardless, though, it is a success for the Knicks. They haven't made the playoffs in almost a decade. They got to have playoff basketball in New York. At the very least, they did win one game. They didn't get swept, and they won that one game in New York. So, that's something to look forward to. A lot of discussion has been had about Julius Randle, whether or not he's a number one guy. Uh, he's not a number one guy to win a championship. That's pretty obvious. But going forward, will they have to make moves, as far as getting him a number two or getting a number one and moving him down to be that number two? So we'll see.
Yeah, I think Randall needs like this playoff series should be really helpful in him becoming more of a number one guy for a championship. Clearly, he was great in the regular season. He just wasn't able to produce as well in the postseason, and he just needs more experience as the guy in the postseason. And this the Hawks gave it to him. I mean, they pressured him hard, and hopefully he comes out next year a little better because uh, playoff Knicks basketball is just it's everyone.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun to watch. It's good for the league. All right. So then moving over to the series that was truly a wash, Milwaukee swept Miami in 4 games. Uh, After game one, I was thinking maybe this is going to be a close series. Not at all. So after they went up 2 games, after game two, they then destroyed Miami in game three and then beat Miami in game four, 120 to 103, completing the sweep. Uh, I guess the Bucks pretty much just decided that they were not going to look as bad as they did in game one. They obviously won the game, but they kept it very close, a lot closer than they wanted. So they went on to just destroy them for the rest of the series.
Yeah, game four. I mean, Miami looked like they could have stolen a game and maybe try to extend the series a little bit. They led all the way into the third quarter
Yeah.
until the third quarter, and in which they fell apart and the sweep was completed. A little fun tidbit about that series is that Brook Lopez was actually kind of like the MVP of the Bucks for those 4 games because he didn't really exist in the regular season this year, and then he came out and I mean he was able to score a good and he shut down Bam Adebayo almost completely. And so it's not what I expected coming out of the Bucks for that series. But I mean, as a Bucks fan, I'll take it.
Yeah, I don't blame you there. I mean, for any fan of any NBA team, like you want to get out of there as fast as possible. So the Milwaukee has a lot of rest. They finished on the weekend. So uh obviously they have to face Brooklyn, but it won't be for a few more days because we've got some other series to wrap up. So having swept Miami, they've got a lot of time to rest, a lot of time to regroup and prepare to face the Goon Squad. So I think Milwaukee will be ready for it for sure. So speaking of the aforementioned Goon Squad, we have the Brooklyn Nets and the Boston Celtics. And Brooklyn completed the gentleman's sweep on Boston, winning the series 4-1. So Brooklyn went up 2 games to nothing after game two, but then Boston stole a game with Jason Tatum going absolutely insane. And it didn't really matter much after that. Brooklyn beating up Boston in game four and then handling them pretty well in game five to complete the gentleman's sweep.
The top few goons on the goon squad went absolutely crazy in game five. I mean, they scored like 100 something points, I'm pretty sure, and I know it was like 80% of the points in the first half were all of them. Just three guys. I mean, that kind of offensive like production is really hard to stop. Celtics aren't exactly the first team you think of as like, oh look, a defensive team, and so it wasn't good. Not to mention after Jason Tatum's crazy game, they lost Kemba, who wasn't playing great anyway, but still not having him out there. Like he was good for things that didn't show up on the stat sheet really. So like losing his presence pretty much washed away any hopes of trying to steal more than one game. They aren't going to win the series, but you know, uh, depending on certain circumstances, they have been able to rob another. But all hope was lost.
Yeah, I mean, once again, I kind of mentioned this with the Knicks. Now, obviously, Boston hasn't missed the playoffs, most of the past decade, but they're the seventh seed. They really didn't have much of a chance against Brooklyn to beat them in this series. They finished with a 500 record this season, so there wasn't really a whole lot of expectations there. They did steal a game. We do know that Jason Tatum is absolutely for real. So with Brad Stevens moving up to the executive position, taking over for Danny Ainge now, they're going to be looking for a new head coach. I would assume Jason Tatum would probably be the first guy to when that happens. So moving forward, I think Boston will get better next year. And I think they just need one more kind of piece and they need to be a more cohesive unit throughout the season. That was really one of their main problems. So, props to Brooklyn. They should have won the series easily. So they have that.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And then moving on to our last Eastern Conference series. This one was a little bit of a surprise, but there's good reason. Philly defeated Washington 4-1 in the series. So after Philly went up 2-0 in game two, they then won game three, but then they lost game four to Washington after Embiid went down. And Embiid was still out for game five, but they ended up pulling out the win. So they get the gentleman's sweep there as well.
Yeah, it's almost the same thing as the Brooklyn Boston series. You have this, big juggernaut of a team going against the little guys. The little guys rally up and have their big moment where they take a game in the series and they go back to falling apart. Nobody expected the Wizards to beat Philly unless maybe Wizards fans. Same thing with like the Boston Brooklyn situation. But props to Washington for being able to snag a game against Philly, even if it meant that out a game is a game. Of course, the Sixers are great for more than just Embiid, so not really an excuse to drop a game. So I'll give props to Washington. You got to give props to Philly for completing the gentleman's sweep and getting out of there quick, not having to worry about any kind of superhero moments from Bradley Beal or Russell Westbrook beyond stealing that one game.
Yeah, because they could have messed around without Embiid and lost game five too. And they would have had to worry about winning game six, which they probably would have. But like I said, you want to get out of there as fast as possible. You don't want to mess around. So props to Philly for staying put, winning game five, and they will be defending home court until they lose. So, you know, I think Philly, this sounds weird to say, but I think Philly's underrated. Like, I don't feel like people are talking about Philly as much as they should be. I mean, they are the number one seed, but I don't think they're getting as much credit as they possibly could be. Because remember, I mean, they got the number one seed with Embiid missing a decent bit of time. So, I'm not saying they're going to win a title, but people should give Philly a lot more respect.
Yeah, I agree. I think the part of the East in general is just kind of overshadowed because you have Milwaukee and Philly, both really good teams, very complete teams, but then you have the three-headed giant of the Nets, of course, who also have people like Joe Harris behind them. They get a lot of the spotlight, and I think most people, aside from like Philly or Milwaukee fans, expect Brooklyn to come out of the East, and so the other two teams get overshadowed a lot. And I think Philly is even more overshadowed than Milwaukee is.
Yeah, I mean, that's true because at least, Giannis has won two MVPs. People are going to give him that respect now. They have, choked in the playoffs the past few years. but it's not like Joel Embiid's won an MVP yet. He could have easily this year, had he not been injured. Um, but it is what it is. We'll just see what happens in the next round, and that's where they got to prove it at the end of the day. So now we're on to the remaining matchups, and all of these are, of course, in the West. So we have Phoenix and Lakers game 6, Denver and Portland game 6, and then the Clippers and the Mavs game 6. So first, we'll start off with Phoenix and the Lakers. Um, we already mentioned this earlier. AD got injured, of course, in game 4, and he's looking like a game time decision right now. The game starts at 10:30 Eastern time. So we're still really not sure whether or not AD is going to play. So if AD does play, how do you think that'll affect things?
I think if AD comes back and he's in pristine condition, that the Lakers should have a much better chance to get this game back and get the series back in track. Now, if he comes back and he's not quite as, it may not make much of a difference. But having him on the court in general is going to help you not lose by 30. So even if they would end up losing, I don't see happening in general. I don't think it'd be on AD if he did come back and didn't do his best because he came back injured, and then he's going to come back. He's going to try to do space the floor, keep guys from being able to torch them as much, and hopefully keep it from being a 30-point blowout.
Yeah, I mean, again, there's no excuse for the Lakers to have gotten blown out by 30 just because AD was out. I mean, I know how important AD is to this team, but there's still no excuse there. I don't think the Lakers will lose by 30 regardless of whether AD plays or not. Um, if AD does play, I don't think he'll be pristine condition, as you put it. The groin injury is not pretty easy to come back from. Obviously, LeBron had the groin injury a few years ago when he first got to LA, and that kept him out for a while. We don't know the exact extent of the injury, and since it is a game time decision, it can't be like completely debilitating. But still, I wouldn't push it if I was AD because you might aggravate something further, and that really might screw you up in the long term. But if he can come back at least like three-fourths the way AD is, I think that'll help. And LeBron has to be more aggressive. Like I know LeBron is the all-time passer, but I need LeBron to score because if people on the Lakers are just not shooting well, I need LeBron to say, forget it. I'm just going to take it to the basket. I'm going to dominate these people because they can't stop me. It's as simple as that. Um, whether AD plays or not, like LeBron, he's the best player in the world at any given moment. So he has to go 100% and he can't be passive at all. So if AD's there, LeBron goes full throttle. If Dennis Schroeder can actually make a shot, the Lakers have a chance to win. And it's just a LeBron factor, man. I just can't see LeBron going out like this. I don't know. It's completely possible. But with that Laker crowd there in LA, man, I can't imagine it. So I feel like the Lakers gonna win tonight.
Yeah, I gotta agree with you. It sounds like you laid this complicated list, but don't be fooled by what Tess saying. They're all easy things for this Lakers team to accomplish. Full throttle. It's just a matter of mentality. Dennis hitting a shot is his usual way of playing. He played awful the other night, but normally that's what Dennis should get. So although what Terrace laid out for the Lakers to win may sound like it's a lot of steps, should be easy for them on even an off night. They're just not a bad night. You got bad off and then a good night. But yeah, the Lakers I think will win this one. I just can't fathom in my mind LeBron losing first round, and not only that, but losing first round in anything less than 7. So it's just I can't see it happening, and I think the Lakers are going to come out, get hyped up by the LA crowd, and put a whooping on Phoenix.
Yeah, and back to Schroeder for a second. Now, obviously, Schroeder isn't like the most important guy on the team, and Schroeder not making a shot, you know, it has an effect on the team, obviously, but it's not going to kill them. Like I expect him to at least score 10 points, but the team doesn't live and die with him. He absolutely needs to score. Like, there's no excuse for being on the floor 20 minutes and not scoring if you are a guard. Like, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's inexcusable for any player to be on the court that long. Like, the only stat line I've ever seen like that is from Dennis Rodman, and that's Dennis Rodman. All right, so that's not even a comparison there. Not the same position, not the same caliber of player, not the same type of guy, not the same type of game. So Dennis Schroeder needs to come out. He needs to shoot well. It's simple as that. And if they do that, they can force a game 7. And if LeBron does lose, oh, I don't want to say LeBron, but if the Lakers do lose in game 7, I don't want this to be some kind of indictment on LeBron here, but he definitely is going to get a lot of criticism going forward.
Yeah. Just tonight, I won't want to hear Undisputed tomorrow morning. Skip will have field day.
Oh my man, he'll have a field day until the doggone Clippers lose game 6, and then they'll both be crying up there anyway. Speaking of the Clippers, we're moving on to them because Denver and Portland are actually playing right now, so we'll put them last. The Clippers are obviously down 3-2, and they're going to Dallas, which is the place that they won both of their games in this series, funnily enough. Um, I don't know what I can say about the Clippers, man. Like, they've just been disappointing to say the least.
The Clippers, especially at the end of Game 5, I don't know what they were doing, man. Terrence Mann had an open layup. He passed it back to Batum, and he got the steal. The pass to Batum opened up Batum for like, and Batum missed it. But it's a goof on both of them. So they missed the opportunity to go up 102 to 101. I think Kawhi gets the ball to try to tie it 103, 103. And I don't know where he thought the basket was, but he shot nowhere close to it. And of course, they come up short and lose 105 to 100. And it's just kind of like, wow, you cannot have that happen and that kind of pressure in a game. I mean, they got like 3 chances to win within 20 seconds, and they fumbled all of them. And it's just you can't do that, especially not with a team with Kawhi George, Kawhi Leonard, and Paul George on your team. Um, and I just want to go ahead and mention this. I will say I undisputed this from Shannon, but I want to get your thoughts on it. Kawhi seems to escape the superstar criticism that people like LeBron and Giannis get for making. What do you think on that?
Uh, in I'd say from social media, definitely not. Social media would be tearing him up. Not as much as Paul George, of course. They dubbing him Pandemic P now, but from the social media, he definitely gets a lot of criticism. But from the general media, probably not. I don't think they really go hard at Kawhi. I guess it's just because I guess it's just maybe it's his personality. I'm not really sure. Um, you have to blame Kawhi for what happened last year, along with Paul George. I mean, he just didn't show up when they were up 3-1 against the Denver Nuggets. And you blow that lead, and they just didn't show up in those last few games. I I'm not really sure what it is about Kawhi that like he doesn't get a whole lot of criticism. Um, I guess it maybe just is the fact that he just doesn't really talk that much. He's not um a superstar personality, I should say. But Giannis doesn't really talk much either. So I'm not really sure what it is, but I definitely do think that he doesn't get that criticism from the media at least.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. I mean, he's not a big talker, but neither are people like Harden and Giannis, and they seem to get fried up sometimes. So I guess it's just something about Kawhi. He kind of slips through. But speaking of the superstar criticism, I mean, he has to be a superstar tomorrow night when they play, and he's got to force this Game 7, or he's probably out of LA, and his record's not going to be too good. I still have a hard time fathoming in my head a guy going to a team, winning a championship immediately, and then leaving, and now he's just crumbled. And so I don't really understand what's happened to my man, but hoping the best. But I must win tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, I think that LA decision, that was a personal thing more than basketball. I mean, of course, LA had a good squad, and do get Paul George, who's supposed to be a star, pair with you. So there were some basketball moves in there, but I think it was more a personal thing than anything else. That's what makes me laugh whenever I see people talking about, he should have stayed in Toronto. It's like, yeah, probably should have, but he didn't really want to be there in the first place. He wanted to go to LA. So, I mean, he did what he had to do. But now if they do get knocked out, like at least they have to at least get to the second round. If they lose in the second round, that's one thing. But you losing now, um, I can't see this team sticking together as it's currently, formed. So uh yeah, Kawhi's probably gonna be going to lose.
Yeah, and I don't want to dwell on this topic for too long, but I do want to just thoughts on one last thing. Rajon Rondo left the defending champ Lakers to go to the where he then, and to go to the Hawks, where he then ended up on the Clippers. The Hawks have advanced 4-1, and the Clippers are on the brink of elimination. How do you think Rondo's feeling at the moment?
I think Rondo probably didn't think that the Hawks were actually going to make the playoffs, considering the Hawks did fire their coach. And obviously Nate McMillan's came in, and he's done an amazing job. Obviously Trey Young is a superstar, getting them to the playoffs. So I don't think Rondo wanted to go there in the first place. So I guess that's just kind of like what I just said with Kawhi. I
Yeah,
think he didn't want to be there in the first place. Like LA was the destination. So but I think the Rondo signing was a little bit overblown in the first place. Like we know what Rondo's done in the playoffs, but to get these guys past the second round, they have to stop Luka. Like they just have to score 40 a game, like I said. So moving on right now as we speak to go in the first quarter. So what do you think is going to happen for the rest of this game?
now I did think that Denver was going to come out and just close out the series, but and it's obviously still, but I mean, you're playing Lillard, and he's not a guy who wants to go home, and he makes that very well known. He plays hard, he gives it everything, and giving too much room is a way to get him to steal a game. If this series goes to 7, I mean, they did it twice last year. Not only that, they came back from 3-1 twice. But if I'm Denver tonight, and so I'm I can to win. Try to close.
There's any they got the Nuggets up out of there. So, it can easily happen again. Uh, and what we mentioned earlier is that Dame can't be the only person doing everything. It is still early, but Norman Powell is leading right now with 8 points, and then Lillard with 7. So you need that consistency from the rest of your team. So if they can keep it up and they beat Denver, it is very possible that they could win Game 7. But we'll have to see what happens.
I agree.
So we're on to some predictions for the second round of the playoffs. Just the Eastern Conference, though. The West obviously isn't completely yet for the first round. So we'll just be focusing on the two Eastern matchups. First up, we have the 2 and the 3 seed, the Bucks and the Nets going up against each other. So looking at the 3 games they played against each other this year, the Bucks won the 2 games to end the season. James Harden did not play in either of those games, though. And then the first game that they played against each other, the Nets won by 2. James Harden did play along with KD, but Kyrie didn't play. So recurring theme with the Nets for most of the season since they made the James Harden trade, Kyrie, KD, and James just haven't played much together. So it'll be interesting to see them play against the Nets. Excuse me, for them to all play against the Bucks for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be a tough series for sure. I don't see this being a win for me. Thing less than 6 or 7, most likely 7 if Milwaukee's going to take it. It's going to be a tough series. These are three offensive juggernauts, and I mean Milwaukee is a great defensive team. It's there. You've got solid defenders at every starting position. A little Dante DiVincenzo not being able to play anymore, but it'll be tough. We've got to gauge ourselves against like kind of duo. So we haven't got to gauge ourselves against the full trio, and having that trio is a lot different than having two of them because it opens up a whole new set of combinations for offensive production, and they make it hard on each other. I don't think either team will sweep each other. I think this will be a long and very tough series for both teams to get out of.
Yeah, anybody saying that this is going to be a sweep is just insane. For one, two, I think if it ends in five, I'd be incredibly surprised. So, like you said, it has to probably go to 6 or 7. I think if the Nets win, it'll probably be in 6. If the Bucks win, then they'll probably have to take it in 7. So now that's not to say that the Bucks are just an incredibly inferior team. I think they're probably one of the most complete teams in basketball by far. You had the two-time MVP Giannis, got Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton has showed up for the playoffs this year in full force. So I thank you, Chris Middleton, for showing up this time and making things interesting. But the Brooklyn Nets are the Brooklyn Nets, and with KD, James Harden, and Kyrie, I think it's just going to be too much in the end. Um, Now, I think the Bucks will probably keep this close like every single game. It's not going to be a blowout for either side, but I do think in the end, the Nets are going to pull it out in 6 or 7, and then they'll advance to the Eastern Conference Finals to probably go up against the Sixers.
Yeah. Being a Bucks fan, I hate to go my own team, so I'm going to take the Bucks in 7. But I completely understand and know the possibility of us not getting past this round, which is it sucks, it's scary, but I hope that we'll do it. It is possible. It is just not easy against this kind of juggernaut of a team. But I'm excited to watch these games. These should be amazing games.
Yeah, I totally agree there. I think, like I said, there's not going to be a chance that either team gets blown out here. And if the Bucks do lose, now I don't think they really care too much about moral victories. 2 years in a row they've had the MVP. Um, and now this year they are the 3 seed. I don't think they care too much about moral victories here, but if they do lose the 7 to the Nets, it's not like they're losing to a bum team. They're losing to a team that has 3 top 5, top 10 caliber players at any moment. So I think if the Bucks do lose, I don't think there's really anything to hang their heads about.
And you're like, okay, we need to reset the team because you lost to the Nets. Like it's take the loss to probably one of the best offensive team in history, and then just try to move on from that and don't beat yourself up too much over it.
Yeah, and I think after, just destroying clean clock in Miami in that first round, I think that kind of gave them a morale boost. Like, hey, these guys got us up out of there in 5 games last year. We should have been in the Eastern Conference Finals. We should have been in the finals instead of them. They got revenge on them. Now you can completely focus on Brooklyn. They do get that break, like we mentioned earlier. So, Bucks very well could win the series, but I think in the end it'll be Brooklyn. Now, moving on to the other matchup in the East, I don't think this one will be as close as we have the Sixers, number 1 seed, taking on the 5 seed, the Atlanta Hawks. And a similar pattern as far as 3 games that they played this year as we had with Brooklyn and Milwaukee. The Sixers ended up winning the last 2 games near the end of the season, but then the Hawks won their game in January pretty decisively. Now, I think this series, even though the Hawks are good and they can probably steal a game, I think it won't go past 5.
I I have to. They're pretty good. They're better than I thought they were, especially with how they pretty much clean clocked the Knicks as you put it, with a 4-1 victory. But the Sixers aren't the Knicks, and the Hawks are going to be outmatched this time. It's not going to be as even as a matchup. Not a team that Trae Young can just fire up and pummel. They have a lot of people, and now the Knicks are a great defensive team as well. But potentially, the year Ben Simmons who can definitely keep up with Trey Young and are in danger here. I give them 5 or 6, definitely not 7, and definitely not a win. This is Sixers to go ahead and advance to the conference finals.
Yeah. Now, I do think how long this series goes will also depend on Joel Embiid's health. I'm not really sure how serious his injury is right now. We know that Embiid has had a lot of injury problems in the past few years. So if this is something that's really serious, I don't think it'll cause them to lose the series, but I think it could push the series farther than they want. And, that might give Embiid more time to rest for the conference finals. But at the same time, you know, once again, you want to get out of it as fast as possible. So if Embiid isn't completely healthy, I wouldn't try to kill him to come back because we've seen multiple times that if you put a guy in before he's ready, it just a lot of times it just won't end well and it won't be worth it in the end. So if Embiid's not completely healthy, don't rush him back, but try to get him back if you can so they can win the series in about 5 or 6.
Yeah, I think like with Embiid being out, if he's out, it gives Clint Capella especially a lot more room to produce offensively, which is going to help the Hawks kind of stretch the series out some. But I don't think that Embiid's absence would let the Hawks beat him. Or if Philly makes it to the conference finals and Embiid's not around to stop the Bucks or the Nets, I think that Philly may be in trouble then. But that's for a later discussion.
Yep. So we'll leave it at that. So if you're listening to the intro, we did mention that we'll have to discuss some more fan foolery in the NBA. And now it's starting to get a little bit ridiculous, and we've seen charges. So the most notable one being Kyrie after game 4, he went over to the Boston Celtics leprechaun logo at midcourt, did a little two-step on it, and not too long after that, he got a water bottle thrown at him by a fan. The fan, who's 21-year-old Cole Buckley, I think that was his name.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's
he
Buckley.
ended up, yep, he ended up getting arrested and charged with assault. So yeah, just a mess, man. What are you thinking?
About last week how the fans are out of hand and they're just doing things that most fans wouldn't even normally be doing, and like throwing popcorn on someone is bad. Spitting on them is worse, and then throwing a bottle at somebody. This is a water bottle. It's plastic. It's hard, so at least it's not like a glass bottle. But this could still cause some harm, especially at the force this thing seemed to like fly by the camera. And let's go ahead and clear up the air of people who think that Kyrie stepping on the leprechaun is equal to having a bottle thrown at him. That's they're not equal. One is stepping on like the floor. He steps on that floor. I mean the whole game to run around, and the other one is potentially harmful. And the guy deserved the charges he got. I mean, you finally are allowed to go back in the arena. You go in and use something like that. You ask for what you get.
Yeah, I mean, that's just stupid. Like, there's nothing else to say there. I mean, that is just plain dumb. No matter what Kyrie did, and once again, like you just said, stepping on a leprechaun logo at midcourt is not equivalent to throwing something at somebody. Once again, you step over the line when you spit on somebody, when you throw something at somebody, no matter if it's popcorn, a water bottle, a beer, whatever it is, you step over that line from being a hyped up fan, a fiery fan, to getting arrested. All right. So the guy did get arrested, got charges. I'm not sure if those charges are going to really stick. I don't think they're going to put the dude in jail or anything like that. But it's just showing another problem that these guys in, in the stands just think they can do whatever they want because they buy a ticket. And once again, that's not how this works. You don't leave society when you enter an arena. You still have to follow laws just because you're at a sports game. All right. You're not going to just automatically become, God, and nothing can be done to you as a fan at a sports arena. So that's just simply not true.
Yeah, I mean these sports fans seems to like not understand that the arena is still a piece of society. And on top of the Kyrie thing, you had Emmanuel quickly, the rookie for the Knicks, say that he was doused with beer, and that's also I mean, it's disgusting. Like, there's no reason for that kind of stuff. And then another like mind-boggling event during a Wizards and Sixers game, a guy just runs on the court mid play and gets tackled by security. You can see Dwight Howard like leaning over him and staring at him. I don't know what's gotten into the fans, bro. They have lost their minds.
I think truthfully, that guy that ran on the floor and just like did a little slide or whatever the heck he was doing, probably did that like just because of all the stuff that had been going on. Because we've seen fans do stuff like that before, but it's different now that because this was after the Russ incident, after the Trey Young incident, after all the stuff with Kyrie, after all of this happened, then the fans like, yo, let me jump on the floor. They did that on purpose. You did that intentionally. And just for that, you should go to jail just for being dumb. All right. Now, obviously, that was probably the least egregious out of all of them. Like he didn't physically assault anyone, but like you just deserve to go to jail just for being a dummy.
Yeah, like, no harm caused to anyone. Maybe he might have wanted to, but it doesn't seem like it based on what he did. So he's not the most villainous, but I would say it's like clearly the most stupid. Like the guys throwing things, you're going to be caught. They're going to see who threw it. They can retrace that on the camera and stuff. But like you have a better chance of maybe not being seen. This guy is just right out for everyone. It's like they're trying to see who can get banned for like the most cool or something. And I put cool in quotations here because I mean assaulting the players is not cool. But the fans seem to not the fans, but some fans seem to think that's the new norm.
Yeah, I mean, it's just juvenile stuff. I mean, this is stuff you do when you're in middle school, bro. Like 21 is young, obviously, as we're still young and we're not 21 yet, but it doesn't matter, bro. Like you're grown. You should know better than to throw stuff, especially at somebody that is just simply walking off the court. I know he stepped on your logo and everything, but the man's walking away. If you're gonna throw the water bottle, look the man in the eye, hit him with it. And then if he responds, you gotta deal with it. But don't just throw it at the man from however many seats he was up, because Kyrie didn't even notice at first because he's walking and it's to the side of him or whatever. And his teammate had to be like, yo, look at this nonsense. So it's just annoying that we're talking about this once again.
Yeah, I hope this is not anything we have to keep mentioning as we go through our episodes here. And I think maybe after this is like the sixth band after the first 2 weeks, maybe we'll get the memo, and then the fans will stop being stupid.
What do I hope so? So for our last little tidbit of news, it's actually not going to be basketball for the first time in 2 weeks. We'll be talking football news and not the NFL or college. So the USFL is coming back in spring of 2022. It was announced today on multiple sports outlets. Um, if you don't know what the USFL was, it was a football league that played 3 seasons back in the early to mid 80s. And it was sort of competing with the NFL, I guess. But, I guess it's the biggest competition that the NFL has really ever had, if you want to say the NFL has a competition since the merger of the NFL and the AFL. Now, we have had some pretty notable guys that played in the USFL while it was still in existence. Herschel Walker, Jim Kelly, Steve Young, Reggie White, and Sam Mills, just to name a few guys that played in USFL. Um, Now it looks like they'll be bringing all the same teams back. I'm not very sure about that one. I have to update you again once we get some more news. But regardless of how they're doing it, it is nice to see another football league come back, and it's more football, so I'm all for it.
Yeah, it does look like they're going to be keeping the old team names, and I mean, we should have the NFL, the USFL, and the XFL. Of course, I think bigger competitors here would be the XFL and USFL because the NFL is the NFL at this point. It's not really looking for anybody to come and take it over. But yeah, I mean, it's more football. It should be fun. I'm excited to see how they form their rosters and everything, and I'm all on football.
Yeah, I mean, one of the worst feelings in the world is after the Super Bowl is like, dang, we don't have any football until August again, and that's just preseason. So really, no real football, NFL football, at least till September. So it's nice to have these leagues in the spring. Obviously, it's not going to be the same quality as the NFL, but more football, I'm all for it. So that is going to be it for this episode, guys. I want to thank you all for tuning in this episode once again. This episode will be on Spotify. We started on Spotify last episode. So if you're a Spotify listener, go check it out on Spotify. The link will be in the description. But that being said, this has been T Brown 31 with J Bot the Great. We hope you enjoyed this video. Like, comment, subscribe. We'll see y'all later.